Brenden Abbott, aka the Postcard Bandit. Brenden received the name the Postcard Bandit. What had happened is he it was back in the days where you had to get film developed, and the police found a stolen car in Adelaide somewhere with a roll of film in it, which contained photos of Brenden Abbott out front of a police station, out front of on Ayers Rock with Japanese tourists and other places. They sold it to the media that he was sending them postcards, sticking his finger in it, and trying to turn the public against him. I think it had a different effect than that. I think it didn't have that effect. I think that he won the sort of the public over. What had happened? Brenden was doing time in Perth's Fremantle Prison, which is now closed, for armed robbery charges, and he escaped. Um, he was on the run for 6 years. He pulled off some of the biggest armed robberies, including Christmas Eve. He robbed the bank. He robbed the Commonwealth Bank at Broadbeach, Pac Fair. I think he got $900,000 one out. That's back in. I think that was back in 90. It was 93, 94. He got that, and that's like about $4 million today. He got that one out, and he was no one with Brenden. He no one got shot or killed or anything in any of his armed robberies, and as you said, he was on the run for 6 years, and he avoided police capture, and he was he was eventually caught on the Gold Coast here in Queensland, and he went to Sir David Longlands, and he hatched a plan to escape. I think he's back in custody 2.5, 3 years max, and he escaped from Sir David Longlands prison using a wheelie bin with the bottom of it cut out to push through the razor wire so he could crawl through that. And he had the assistance of a guy that he met in jail called Brendan Barrashon. Brendan Barrashon helped break him out, and they went on the run together. And unfortunately, they drew the attention to the police in Melbourne, where Brendan Barrashon had a shootout, and Brenden was later captured in Darwin and returned to custody. Since being in custody, he has been basically tortured by, in particularly, the Queensland prison system, who think it's their job to punish people. And it's not their job. Their job is to maintain that the security of the prison is upheld, that people come and go from their prison. They just take it on. They took it really personal and punished him. They put him in a segregation unit, which consists of sensory deprivation. He was put in there for 17 years. 17 years. Not a sex offender in Australia has spent that much time in jail, let alone a high security unit like Brenden did. He would get transported to court or to another prison, and they'd fly him in a helicopter. They'd shut the whole jail down and put him in a helicopter and transfer. It was just overkill, and it was this big pissing competition to see who could be the baddest. And his crime was he embarrassed the government. That's what his crime was. It was nothing to do with his crimes of bank robbery, and he embarrassed the government. And he applied whilst he was in custody to be extradited to Western Australia for his other charges, and they denied him and denied him and denied him. And there's a principle of law called the Mills Act, and it's principle of totality. All these crimes are committed in one spree, and they should be dealt with together. So that denied him the opportunity to have it all dealt with in one go. By the time Brenden finished his current sentence, he spent 34 years in prison. He never killed anyone. That's the type of sentence. If you're doing a sentence for double murder, you'd mostly do 26 years. He does 34 years. For what? He's never killed a child. He's never raped anyone. He's never he's never done a double murder or anything like that. It's crazy the amount of time he does. For what? What are we trying to say? We're sending a message to society to say robbing banks is worse than killing fucking children or raping children. That's a really bad message to send. And Brenden himself, I know a bit of a background. Brendan's an abuse survivor himself, not too dissimilar to myself. He's from, a dysfunctional family. He grew up tough. I dare say the abuse would have played a pivotal part in his view in the world. And I think it was in foster care or some sort of stuff like that. So the people who were meant to protect him were abusing him. So why would he have any respect for that authority or whatever? And I don't blame him, but I think we've got to send a message to the politicians that we value our children, and Brenden is an abuse survivor, and I think you take the abuse out of his life, and I think we actually didn't have this outlaw Brenden Abbott, there's a fair chance. No, I think very similar to mine. I was acknowledged by the courts. If I wasn't abused, I actually wouldn't have been doing what I did. So I have no. How do you do that? How do you someone gets abused, they go on, and this is what happened to me is you get abused and you go through the courts and these people are telling you how bad you are, but you've had all these horrific bad things happen to you. I don't understand it, and Brenden would definitely go through that, and I think it's just a really, really poor indictment on our society when our banks and are more important than our children. I think it's really poor, and I think this torturing of Brenden Abbott, and there's even talk of him now being extradited to South Australia once this sentence finishes for 34 years into it. He's made applications to have all his matters dealt with, and these politicians are waiting. They just all want a piece of his flesh, and it's wrong. It's so wrong. It's got to stop. And I think if we draw attention to it, it does stop eventually.